Alcohol is not the only beverage that endangers our liver. A new study finds some sugar substitutes likely have a negative impact too. The Morning Medical Update starts now. Good morning. It's Monday, May 16th. I'm Jill Chadwick in for Jessica Lovell, who is off today. Thanks for joining us here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Coming up today, new research into a possible cause of sudden infant death syndrome. What this new finding means for parents and doctors. Then, in just 15 minutes, Dr. Dana Hawkinson joins us with the latest COVID-19 numbers. But first, forget the sugar. Those so-called healthy drinks filled with sugar substitutes could affect your liver and the rest of your body more than we knew. Why you may want to consider nothing but water. Get your questions to us on YouTube, Facebook, and the Medical News Network. The links to those are right here on your screen. So how many times a day do you drink a diet soda? What about adding artificial sweetener to your coffee or food? It's estimated that 40% of Americans eat and drink what is called non-nutritive sweeteners. Those sweeteners are found in light or zero sugar versions of yogurt, snack foods, and even in non-food products like liquid medicines and certain cosmetics, which was a surprise to me. I didn't know that. Perhaps you're wondering what those sweeteners are doing to your body. Well, this graphic from the University of Wisconsin gives us one example. As you can see, those sweeteners can cause some medications to get trapped in your liver cells, leading to liver toxicity. Our expert today knows a thing or two about the liver, Dr. Ryan Taylor, Medical Director of Liver Transplantation, and one of my personal favorites. Welcome back, Dr. Taylor.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Good to see you. First, can we bring that graphic back up that we just showed everyone and talk a little bit more about what is going on and why these substitute sweeteners are so bad for our liver?
Yes, Jill. So looking at some of this newest research that's coming out is showing that some artificial sweeteners may be inhibiting a protein called P-glycoprotein, which is critical in detoxifying the body, helping with drug metabolism, and removing things we don't need from the body.
Does that surprise you?
It was surprising because it was something that we hadn't really seen before, and to start to think about some of the other potential negative effects of these artificial sweeteners is concerning.
And I think my follow-up question is, so what if my body doesn't detoxify?
Well, obviously these proteins then can circulate, they combine in other areas. This is where it can affect some other cellular systems. You start to then have questions about how these impact, such as cancer, some of the other negative things we may have heard about artificial sweeteners in the past.
Okay, I want to read some of these artificial sweeteners. There are 8 FDA-approved artificial sweeteners. I'm probably going to say them wrong, so I'm channeling Dr. Stites. Okay. Aspartame, also known as NutraSweet or Equal, found in sodas and cereal, 200 times sweeter than sugar. Now that sounded like a lot, but wait. There's asulfame, potassium, neotame, which is up to 13,000 times sweeter than sugar, and saccharin, also known as sweet and low, discovered in the late 1800s. We're going to talk about that. That was a new thing for me. Number 5 is sucralose, also called Splenda, used in canned fruit and baked goods. It's the yellow packet. And stevia is number 6, monk fruit, number 7. And the latest is advantame extract, said to be 20 to 50,000 times sweeter than sugar. I can't even wrap my brain around that. So Dr. Taylor, which 2 substitutes are the worst for people to eat and drink, and why?
Well, obviously we've not done head-to-head studies to show which ones may have potential risks compared to others, but I would say that the ones in the recent study that we just quoted, asulfame, potassium, as well as sucralose, are the 2 that I'm most concerned about now with hearing the effects on the liver.
Okay, so the sweeteners can affect more than just the liver. A recent study found if you consume non-nutritive sweeteners all the time, it might disrupt our gut bacteria, which are important for optimal health. Does that mean I'm going to get gassy, bloated? What's happening there?
So we're learning more and more about our gut bacteria. It's a very hot topic right now, and so we find that our gut bacteria are heavily involved with our inflammatory state and maintaining good health. And so we are finding that some of these artificial sweeteners may actually disrupt our usual gut bacteria pathways and increasing inflammation. And this can have negative effects in the body, such as causing fatty liver and other problems.
What about all those active yogurt products that say, eat some of that and that restores it, but then what if they've got the artificial sweetener in them? Is there a battle going on inside?
There's probably a battle going on in there. You're obviously giving healthy bacteria with some of these types of yogurt, but then you have your artificial sweeteners that you have to balance. So there's always a balance in everything.
All right, so these are FDA approved, which explain that part to me. Why are these FDA approved still when we start having some of this research comes out? I mean, scientists seem divided.
Absolutely. Well, I think we have to go back to the history and realize that some of our first artificial sweetener research came out in the 1870s. So these have been around with us for a very long time. And the FDA claims that they've done numerous studies on these to allow approval. So some of the most commonly used artificial sweeteners have had 90, 100, 110 studies reported showing safety and a lack of risk for people.
We're going to get to some community questions, but I have one more question. I was reading, and it says the National Library of Medicine researchers say there have been enough animal studies to convincingly prove that artificial sweeteners cause weight gain, brain tumors, bladder cancer, and other health hazards, including being carcinogenic in humans. So again, I ask, we're still okay to eat them?
I think we have to be very cautious and obviously take things with a grain of salt sometimes as we learn about these things. But one thing I would point out is that the amount that the FDA says is safe to consume is quite staggering. And so if you look at what the FDA feels is a safe amount of these sweeteners, it may be up to 2375 packets a day of some of these artificial sweeteners. So very much beyond what the average person would consume in a day.
And I bet you can't just count what you're putting in your own sugar or iced
Yes.
tea, right?
Right, exactly.
I mean, in your iced tea or your coffee.
Right.
You got to read labels.
Well, that's one of the problems here, actually, Jill. So the actual amount of artificial sweeteners and products is not listed currently at this time. And this is one of my concerns, is that it will tell you that it's contained in a product, but it won't tell you how much.
Let's go to Bob Hallinan, who's taking viewer questions this morning. Bob, welcome back. We got third string in again today.
We're going pretty deep in the bench, I'll say. That's
We
for
are.
sure. All right,
morning.
Good morning. Got a couple of questions so far. Leanne wants to know if any amount of sugar substitute is safe to consume each day.
So this comes back to kind of my point earlier, is that the amount that the FDA says is safe is quite a bit larger than what the average individual will take. So I think you have to use your personal judgment. Probably having 1 or 2 servings a day is probably not going to confer the same health risk as some of these larger servings that the FDA says may be safe.
All right.
Bob?
Dane says that both sugar and artificial sweeteners sound bad to eat. And bottom line, which is worse on the liver? And more important, what do you tell your patients?
That's a really tough thing. So we have a battle here with both sides. So obviously sugar and glucose and those kind of sweetened foods naturally obviously contain calories. That's why a lot of people choose artificial sweeteners to eliminate calories from their diet. So as far as fighting liver disease, we want to try to minimize our calories that our patients have that could cause fatty liver. But on the other hand, as this research emerges, I have to admit, I myself am more concerned about some of the interactions within the liver that we're seeing.
All right. We're going to ask you some more gut questions in a moment. I'm sure that our viewers, they usually like to, we may veer a little bit off artificial sweeteners, but I know you've got this. But first, Dr. Dana Hawkinson, Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control, joins us with our numbers. Are you a sugar fanatic?
You know, I do like I like some Sour Patch Kids, and I've certainly tried to go away from it in my older age. But yeah, sometimes you need a little bit of sugar to get by. So yeah. But right now, and it's good to talk about these other things rather than COVID. I think we are more than weary from that. So right now, things are really looking good in the hospital. 5 active infections, 2 in the ICU. Sorry, it's actually 0 in the ICU, none on the ventilator, and 7 in that recovery period as well. And would also like to say that, you know, looking at the MARC data, comparing where we are currently with where we were in the really the worst part, the peak of the Delta Omicron surge. At that point in time, we were having 4,300 cases a day was the average number of cases reported. Now we're down to under 200. And as well for hospitalizations, we were at 270 hospitalizations for the rolling 7-day average at the peak of the Delta and Omicron surge. Right now, we're at 46 again. This is the MARC data that's reported publicly. So overall, we're looking a lot better, Jill.
All right, well, that sounds good. However, in the last 48 hours, there have been some headlines that have come out about Omicron and new cases, subvariants that are spreading quickly. What do you make of all that, and how are the death and hospitalization rates being impacted?
Yeah, you know, what we have from our data and in the United States is we know that cases are going up again. how true are some of those cases, because we know some people probably are not presenting for the PCR testing. They're doing at-home testing or not testing. But the hospitalizations, we haven't seen a very large uptick. We have seen some increase in hospitalizations since this new surge is going on, but nowhere near the level that we have before. And this is also consistent with what, say, the UK as well as South Africa has seen. And again, they have more B4, or BA4, BA5 in South Africa. They haven't seen the commensurate rate increase in hospitalizations and death, even though they were having a surge in cases. And I think this mostly is attributable to the individual's immunity, mostly from vaccination, but also possibly from infection and reinfection. And so we aren't seeing that, and hopefully I think we are all being optimistic and thinking we will not see that hospitalization and death surge as we did with Delta and Omicron. We will not see that right now with this surge moving forward, so hopefully that will hold true.
Still, if you look at the cases, we mentioned that in March, COVID-19 dropped drastically in the U.S.
Yeah.
At one point, the U.S. was 13th in the world in the 7-day average. Now it's back up to second behind Germany. Yeah, I mean, is this, it's just contagious?
Yeah, I think
Hyper-contagious?
that's what we have to understand, is that if people are out there, we know the virus is circulating. If you're going to be doing things now, there's graduation parties, weddings, all of those things that people are getting together, we know the virus is going to be able to spread. We are seeing that those increase in cases overall. Again, the thing that we want to make sure is that we can protect people from coming to the hospital, going to the ICU, and it seems like we're doing that. Again, just be up to date on your vaccination. If you have symptoms, test early, and get on Paxlovid, which is the oral drug that is preferred right now to take as an outpatient, to take when you're home, to help prevent you from going to the hospital as well. All of those things will help prevent those hospitalizations, and I think that's part of what we are seeing as well. So as long as the cases may be going up, but if we can protect people and keep people from coming to the hospital, that's what we want.
Okay, just two more COVID headlines.
Yeah.
You can tell I was reading over the weekend. What do you make of this North Korea announcing its first COVID deaths ever amid an explosive outbreak?
Yeah, I think things can be very bad in North Korea. We know the lack of resources that they have. We know this has been a hermit society, a shutout society. A lot of the aid workers have left there as well. So this could be very bad. We know the infrastructure in North Korea is certainly suboptimal for many things, including healthcare. It is a concerning issue for sure for all of those people in North Korea, but we'll just have to see how it plays out. We know that they really have not had vaccination as well, and so now they are really catching up 2 years of what the world has been catching up as far as cases go, infection-induced immunity, but also, again, they don't have that most safest way. They don't have those vaccines to help induce that vaccine immunity as well. It could be a very bad situation there. And it's also a matter of how much are we really getting to know and understand, because we know how locked down they are as far as letting news out. So,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, last question right now from me. I'm sure the community will
Yeah.
probably have some more for you, but Novavax, it's back in the headlines again, saying it's confident its COVID vaccine will receive FDA authorization in June after delays. I mean, they are so late to the party. You need to remind me what type of vaccine this is. Is this an mRNA?
This is not an mRNA.
Okay.
So this is the spike protein. A lot of these vaccines are spike. This is a spike protein that they have grown in a lab and created, and then added it to another component to be able to inject into your arm. So this is more of an older technology where we just have the piece of that virus. In particular, this is the spike piece. This may offer one more option for those people that may be concerned or vaccine hesitant about either the J&J vaccine or the mRNA vaccines. This may be one other option to offer to those people as well. I'm hoping it does get approved or authorized. That is one more thing that we can use to help get the shots in arms to get that vaccine-induced immunity. So yeah.
That is so true.
Yeah.
So don't go anywhere, okay?
I'll be right here.
Right. I'm sure there'll be some questions. I'm sure I wasn't the only person reading over the weekend.
Yeah.
So, all right, we are talking this morning about the impact sweeteners have on the liver and the body. With us is Dr. Ryan Taylor, Medical Director of Liver Transplantation. He's a great guy if you've got any GI questions. He can probably answer those beyond the sugar and sweetener. But most people consume artificial sweeteners because they say they want to lose weight. Is that helpful?
It's actually a lot of clever marketing with the use of diet and these artificial sweeteners. And so we have to remember that they're not going to actually help you lose weight, but they may actually allow you to substitute high-calorie foods containing regular sugars with artificial sweeteners. So you still have some taste, you still have that sweet taste, but not all the calories that come with it.
And some of these artificial sweeteners are made from chemicals. Some of them come from herbs and plants. Are the ones made from herbs and plants, are they just so much better for us?
We like to think so, but obviously there's a lot of slippery slope with these. So when we think about this, there's a lot to consider, but a lot of these have been made in the lab, and so a lot of chemistry and complicated names involved with these, so I think that that's obviously a concern.
Right, and do your patients, we talked a lot about liver transplant, but you do treat other people, so does it matter, pertaining to whatever kind of ailment they might have? Do you ever say stay away from the sugar, stay away from artificial, or do you just say stay away from all of it?
I think you have to work with what's best for the patient, and so obviously for many of our patients we're trying to help maintain healthy weight, healthy metabolism, and so for whatever works for the patient to achieve that is best.
I want to ask you, what is the leading cause of liver failure now that leads to transplant? Alcohol used to be the one that got the big bad rep. Is it still?
Alcohol's still around. We haven't seen any decrease in alcohol numbers for transplant. That's been very steady since we've started doing transplantation. Fatty liver is really the new rising cause that we're seeing. It's the leading cause of transplant in women, and so that's really the epidemic that we're seeing right now is fatty liver. Historically, hepatitis C was a major cause of transplant, but with the advent of new drugs, we're pretty much curing everybody that has that. So that disease process is really disappearing, and to take its place is fatty liver.
And just explain a little bit what fatty liver is, because I know when I first started working here 11 years ago, if you can believe it, that I assumed that in order to have a fatty liver, you had to be overweight. But my nephew, who's lean and thin, his side of the family has a tendency to have fatty liver. What is it and what causes it?
So fatty liver is actually part of a bigger spectrum of problems called the metabolic syndrome. And so it's an issue where you have excess energy, which then can turn to fat, which then gets stored in the liver, and that fat in the liver then can cause inflammation and scarring. So it's just a part of a spectrum of problems such as diabetes, high blood pressure, weight being above target, those type of things that we all think about when we think about metabolic diseases, but the liver is central in that.
And so whether it's alcohol, hep C, or fatty liver, it all ends up, if you don't control it, in the same place with cirrhosis?
Absolutely. So your liver is actually one of the best organs in healing and repairing itself. So these things that Joe mentioned, such as hepatitis, fatty liver, alcohol, cause inflammation and damage to the body. The liver then tries to heal itself, but over time, those healthy cells get replaced by scar tissue, and that's ultimately what can lead to cirrhosis.
All right. Okay. Has COVID been hard on your patient population?
It has been hard. Well, we've seen higher rates of death in patients who have cirrhosis and liver disease if they get COVID infection. So that's been tough. Obviously, we have a lot of patients who struggle with alcohol problems, and so we all know about alcohol rates increasing during the pandemic, so that's been a problem as well. And then a lot of our patients face socioeconomic challenges, and that's also been very tough, just trying to find the resources to get to their medical appointments, get their medications, and be able to follow up with us.
All right. Let's get to some more questions. Do we have any reporter questions today? All right, Bob, you know what that means. You're on deck. Let's go back and see what people are wanting to know.
Well, actually, we have one for Dr. Taylor. You just talked about fatty liver, and Angela's wondering, how would you know if you have a fatty liver? My mother has a fatty liver, she says. So how does one know?
That's one of the real challenges with fatty liver disease. It's generally silent. So you have no symptoms, no outward manifestations of fatty liver. Usually it's picked up during a routine physical when someone gets blood test. And a blood test called ALT may be elevated, and that will prompt the doctor to check an ultrasound, which can show a fatty liver. But we don't have a good blood test to really diagnose it. There's no symptoms. There's nothing I can tell people to go to their doctor with if they have problems. In some cases that are more severe, they may have pain from a liver enlargement, but generally most patients have no symptoms.
So that's one of these times probably when it's good to ask your family about their history for those who might be impacted because they're passing it down, right?
Right, so there is some genetic component. You mentioned a family member who's lean and has fatty liver, so we do know that there's a subset of patients who do have normal body weight and still get fatty liver, and that's where the genetics become a big part.
But otherwise, maybe good to keep your weight in check?
Always good to keep your weight in check, always good to get your physicals, get those liver tests checked. That's really our only way to know initially that there's something wrong with your liver.
All right, Bob, what else?
Okay, Mike wants to know, some studies show that sugar can be as damaging to the liver as alcohol, even if you're not overweight. Why is that?
So obviously there's a lot of things that can damage the liver. Alcohol is the prime thing we talk about. I was here a couple weeks ago talking about alcohol in your liver, so we certainly know about that. Alcohol can actually get converted into sugars and then also damage the liver directly, so that's why alcohol is so particularly difficult. But sugars in themselves are a prime leading cause of this excess energy problem that I'm mentioning. American diets just have too many calories. Our bodies weren't designed to handle these amount of calories, and then they store the energy in some fashion, and that's where it develops in the fat in the liver.
Wow. Bob?
All right. Well, it wouldn't be a morning if we didn't have one from our faithful viewer, Isaac. This one's for Doc Hawk. It says, lately I've heard about nasal spray vaccines. Any updates on that or local trials for them?
Great question.
Yeah, no, I think that we are hoping that something will come about. Again, one more option for people who don't want to have a needle, essentially, and it may even offer more mucosal immunity, so immunity in the nasal passages in that upper respiratory tract. No more news other than what came out a couple months ago, I believe, when we discussed it here on this show and on Open Mics with Dr. Stites, just about they are working on that. Hopefully those trials are still going forward. We obviously know that the bar for vaccine effectiveness and protection is going to be set very high because of the mRNA effectiveness. But those trials still are going on. I don't believe there's any local trials with that. I don't believe we have anything here at the health system or with University of Kansas Medical Center. And obviously Dr. Castro does a lot of those trials, but I don't believe we are involved in any of those at this point in time. But hopefully we know that it is still moving forward. Hopefully there will be some data out soon. And again, one more option that we can get for people.
All right, Bob?
Doug from Lenexa wants to know why stevia is a better alternative versus the other options.
So stevia is actually interesting. It's actually derived from a plant, so it's more of a natural product. And actually some early research is showing that stevia may actually be helpful for patients with fatty liver, showing some decrease in inflammation and decrease in liver markers that actually are associated with fatty liver. So more to come on that, but quite promising research going on with stevia.
Another fatty liver question. Judy wants to know, is fatty liver reversible?
Actually, it is. So we do see patients where they turn things around, and so obviously we need patients to adhere to a healthy diet coupled with exercise, change the metabolism balance so that they're burning calories, not saving calories, and we actually can see patients with fatty liver turn around.
All right. Kathy's asking, is it true some over-the-counter medications like Benadryl can cause liver problems?
I'm not so familiar with Benadryl causing liver problems. We use it a lot to treat patients with symptoms from liver disease, such as itching. So it's not something I commonly think of as a major problem to cause liver problems.
Tylenol, though.
Tylenol for sure. Oh my gosh,
yeah.
We're always having trouble with acetaminophen. That is one of those interesting substances that probably, if went through the FDA process nowadays, may have difficulty getting approved. So we're kind of talking about how things become into our armamentarium that we use, and that's something that's been around for a really long time. But Tylenol can certainly have a double-edged sword. Too much Tylenol, or with alcohol, or if you're fasting, too much of a good thing can certainly cause liver damage, and unfortunately even can be severe enough to cause liver failure.
Well, and I've also heard that if you have toxicity from the Tylenol, it's painful.
You can, from the amount of inflammation and damage caused to your liver, certainly can cause some acute pain, but that's usually because your liver is so inflamed and in fact shutting down in some cases that it can certainly cause some discomfort.
All right, Bob?
All right. Oops, what happened to it here? Joe Ellen says, why do artificial sweeteners leave an aftertaste in your mouth? I hate the taste of Diet Pop, so I quit drinking it years ago.
Well, good for her. I agree, though. Sometimes you do taste that.
I just think it has to affect on how your taste receptors, on how these things are perceived by your brain. And so, some things just don't quite perceive as well as the good old-fashioned sugar. So it's just has to do with the chemistry and binding to the taste molecules.
Well, Vicky's asking, as an insulin-dependent patient, which sweetener should I use?
So, good question. They're obviously looking at some of the benefits or less risk of some of these sweeteners in diabetics. Obviously stevia is having some interesting applications there, so it's hard to say that there's one that's better for certain disease states, but it's certainly of interest to researchers.
Okay, and Gene has one for Doc Hawk. Wants to know, what is Dr. Hawkinson's opinion of ADE possibly affecting the effectiveness of the vaccines? I don't know what ADE is, and I bet you Dr. Hawkinson does.
It's basically antibody-dependent enhancement. That is a theoretical risk that has never been shown or proven for this particular infection and vaccine. Basically, it means if you got the vaccine and you were to get the infection, it would be much worse because of you have these antibodies now that would enhance the infection. Again, theoretical. We have seen no evidence of that. That was postulated early on when the vaccines were coming out. There's absolutely no proof of that. The vaccines continue to be safe, and you are much better off getting the vaccines and then getting infected. You have that immunity built up, but there's no evidence of the ADE there. So I think that is one thing you can put your mind to rest about.
Okay, and you went through that list of all the sugar substitutes earlier. Gene was wondering, did you mention Truvia? I guess that's another brand, and is that different from any of the others?
It's part of the, I think, stevia, maybe?
I think it's Truvia, I believe, is the product name of stevia. Stevia is the actual basic name, but the brand name is Truvia.
I think that's correct.
All right. Deb is asking, is Tylenol safe for the liver as long as it's taken as directed? And what about someone that takes it daily for pain?
Acetaminophen can be safe. Obviously, it's a widely used medication, but I usually tell my patients with liver problems or liver concerns to limit their acetaminophen use to no more than 2,000 milligrams a day, which ends up being 4 extra strength tablets. So that's what I usually advise my patients with liver problems. But if you follow the package insert, generally that should be okay. Certainly the one area where folks can get in trouble is if they're drinking too much alcohol and mix it with acetaminophen. That the alcohol actually causes the toxic metabolite of acetaminophen to increase in the blood, and so that can actually amplify the risk for toxicity. So if you're a heavy drinker or taking something for a hangover, probably acetaminophen is not your best choice in that regard.
What about NSAIDs like ibuprofen?
NSAIDs don't have the same interaction there with alcohol or with the acetaminophen, so that might be actually a better alternative in those circumstances.
I saw the other day where they're packaging it together, the Tylenol and the ibuprofen.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think of that?
I think it's interesting. I think they're both very potent anti-inflammatories in what they do. But one of my concerns with acetaminophen is it's contained in so many different products. It's in things such as NyQuil, non-aspirin pain relievers. And so we see a lot of patients get confused and have some acetaminophen in their pain medication. Then they take it for a flu remedy. And before you know it, they're having much more than they should, but it's because they're getting it from multiple different sources.
Any danger with those nighttime pills? You said NyQuil, but what about like Tylenol that helps you go
Tylenol PM, absolutely. So we'll have patients who will take their Vicodin, which contains acetaminophen, and then they'll take a Tylenol PM, which obviously has acetaminophen, and then they may have a couple glasses of alcohol to help go to sleep, and the next thing you know, it's a right combination for toxicity.
Wow. Wow. Bob?
All right, here's another one for Dr. Hawkinson from Don. He says, if you are immune compromised and over 65 and have had the full COVID series plus 2 boosters, once the second booster is at the 6-month mark, is there a recommendation for another booster since the immunity seems to decrease?
Yeah, we certainly know immunity against infection does wane. Those antibodies contract. You have decreased levels of circulating antibodies. Right now, there is no further recommendation after that 5 doses. Again, if you're immune compromised, 3 doses is the primary series, and then the 2 boosters, as we heard in the question. So right now, there is no further recommendation, even if you are more than 6 months out. I think those are things that we are going to be looking for moving forward when ACIP meets. We've obviously had Dr. Kevin Alt on. He is part of that. Most recent and coming up, they are going to be meeting about the childhood vaccines, particularly for those under 5. But we know that moving forward, there will be further recommendations for or against additional doses for those people that now are up to date with their vaccine. If you're immune compromised, that is a total of 5. And if you are not immune compromised and over 50, again, That would be a total of 4 for the recommended to be up to date. But as far as beyond that, we haven't seen any other further recommendations. I suspect those will be coming out as we get into the late summer and fall, moving into that cooler weather. Just as with influenza vaccine recommendations, we will probably be seeing more recommendations coming up.
Okay, Emily wants to know, could honey or maple syrup be considered healthy sweeteners?
Great, that's actually a great question. That's something that a lot of people look at, is looking at healthier, more natural alternatives to sugars, and so enhancing your foods with those in substitute for other standard sugars may actually be have additional health benefits for you.
Okay.
All right, Brian wants to know, what pain relievers are the least troublesome for your organs?
That's a challenge. I think you
Yeah.
have to look at what underlying health conditions someone has, and if they're generally healthy, non-steroidal agents or acetaminophen are usually perfectly safe. It's when a lot of patients either use them in excess or have other health conditions that put them at risk of toxicities.
I grew up on a farm, and we couldn't always get into town that easily. So we used a lot of ice and a lot of heat pads.
Yes.
Growing up.
Nothing wrong with that.
Those
Nothing wrong
are
with that.
good? Okay.
Rubbing dirt on it.
Yeah, yeah. All right,
All
Bob.
right, we have reached the end of our questions for now. If we get any more before the end, I'll let you know.
Okay, whisper in my ear if you need to. All right,
You
I
bet.
do have one. When it comes to sweeteners, a lot of people have gut issues these days, IBS and those kind of things. Do the artificial sweeteners make some of the symptoms that you might get with IBS worse?
It's possible. We're learning more about that. We certainly had some of the data we talked about earlier where it may affect the gut microbiome there, and so that can obviously be related to some patients' GI symptoms. As far as actually causing GI symptoms, I think it comes to some individual tolerances and how people react to things. Never ceases to amaze me how sensitivities of some patients can have with certain things.
And so here's a personal question. This may be TMI, but now that I have the doctor here. So as you get older, it seems like I have more problems with food. And I had another GI doc passing in the hallway and said, cut out your dairy, cut out your gluten for a while and see if you don't feel better. And I got to tell you, it was major change. Why is that? What's happening?
I think a lot of people have undiagnosed sensitivities to some of these areas, such as gluten's a very popular one, and as well as dairy. I think you have to always take it with a little caution, though, because you don't want to give up some things that are very healthy, in your diet. Gluten, for example, if you aren't truly gluten sensitive, there are some health benefits of our complex carbohydrates that we take in. So I think you have to be careful about excluding things, but some people are just sensitive to this, and that may change as you age. The amount of enzymes that we have that process these things may decline over time.
Yeah, is cake a complex carbohydrate?
Cake is not a complex carbohydrate, unfortunately.
Yeah, right. Bob, I think we have another question.
We do have one more question that came through from Melissa. She says, what about coconut sugar, agave nectar, and brown rice syrup as sweeteners?
So agave is actually quite interesting. So everyone kind of thinks of that being a healthy sugar alternative, but looking at some of the data, it actually may be more sweet and harmful for you than standard sugars. So I think the jury on that right now is a little bit out, and so I would be cautious with that with some of the latest things I've read.
And one of the last questions that I had was that I swear that I'm addicted to sugar because it's a craving that hits, it seems like every night at 9 p.m. And artificial sweeteners, can you get addicted to those just like you would? I mean, does your taste bud know the difference in your brain?
Absolutely. I think it comes not only just the artificial sweetener, but also the caffeine that comes with many of these products. And so, we certainly have know people who need their caffeine to function. So I think it all ties into that. So teasing out what might be kind of your caffeine addiction versus your sweet addiction is a little bit tough, but certainly it seems to make sense.
And I read, too, when I was getting ready for this update, that lactose, that I always think of as in dairy, is actually a sweetener?
It's a sugar, absolutely. So it's one of the natural sugars that we see.
Yeah, people at home are probably eye rolling at me right now, but I did not know that. So yeah, explains a lot. All right, I really appreciate
Of
you
course.
being here today. You
Thank you
know
so
that
much.
personally you're one of my favorite guys. You always take my phone calls, which is really, really nice.
Thank
What
you.
is your final thought that you have for our viewers today?
I think there's still a lot that we need to learn about artificial sweeteners. So, I don't think anything's set in stone right now. Obviously, we've had these for quite some time, so I don't want to raise panic alarms for folks. I think you just need to be mindful, and obviously moderation is always the key.
All right, and our number one doc, Dr. Hawkinson.
I think this is good. We have good questions about what we intake and put into our bodies, especially sweeteners, but also pain medicines. And we heard Dr. Taylor say that everything in moderation is okay. If it continues to be, especially if we're talking about pain meds, if it continues to be chronic, please get with your medical team. But again, everything in moderation, and that will be one more thing to help keep you safe as we are hopefully moving out of the worst parts of the pandemic and getting back to more normal life.
All right, thank you to both of our doctors and our experts this morning. In the headlines this morning, we wanted to tell you about Australian researchers who have uncovered a possible cause of sudden infant death syndrome, which to date has remained a medical mystery. The study identifies a potential biomarker for SIDS. A mother and researcher whose child died of SIDS nearly 30 years ago led the study. Our Dr. Catherine Peatlin, a pediatrician with the University of Kansas Health System, has more.
SIDS is sudden infant death syndrome. Typically occurs in babies like less than 1 year of age, but it's in these kids that have kind of an unexplained, unexpected death. And it occurs pretty frequently, so about 3,400 babies die of SIDS each year in the U.S. Through their research, they found that this biochemical marker, the BCHE, or the butyrylcholinesterase, was decreased. And what that biochemical marker does, it is associated with the arousal pathway in babies. This is very exciting, but like anything, it's gonna probably require just more research in the area, and it takes time. Research takes a lot of time. We need to know maybe a little bit more and have greater numbers to determine whether this is going to be helpful for us to understand this a little bit better, and whether we can provide treatment for those patients that maybe are deficient in this particular enzyme to hopefully maybe prevent SIDS down the road.
Thanks for being with us today. Don't forget, you can catch our morning updates anytime by logging on to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Jessica is truly back tomorrow morning. We'll see you then.
Coming up tomorrow on the Morning Medical Update. More than 7 million people suffer trembling in the hands or arms. But Tuesday, there will be one less person suffering with the problem. I'm Jessica Lovell. We take you live inside the OR to watch the 100th patient receive this newer FDA non-invasive treatment. Join us at 8 on these social media channels.
Subscribe to our Morning Medical Update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcasts. Now, everywhere podcasts are available.